Hey guys, Blue again, and I'm bringing you our deck profile for our Arkana deck. So this is one of the more popular decks that we have. He's definitely one of the more popular of the lesser characters from the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. It's also one of our most refined decks, as in we've gone through it a couple times to try to keep tweaking it because he's a character that we really want to flush out and get the most out of. And um, with cards coming out for him the last few years, it's made that much more successful. But we've made some changes more recently too that we hope really make the deck stand out, really truly for the Master of the Magicians. The first character that the anime introduced that also had the Dark Magician, but the classic Red Dark Magician. That is of course the first card in the deck, and it was one of the newest cards. So we got this card. Was been out in Japan in the OCG for the longest time, to the point where a lot of players, like myself and Delta included, we wondered if it was ever going to get printed in the TCG, and thankfully it was, and it looks beautiful. The card is spectacular. The art is amazing. Very, very memorable from that duel in the Battle City story arc. So again, one of the newer cards was Legion, the Fiend Jester. Didn't quite have this much of an effect in the anime, but I mean, its effect does definitely make this deck better, given that this deck is actually very, very light on monsters, and very heavy on spells and traps, which does make sense for Arkana, being that he was more into the tricks of the trade, so to speak. So Legion the Fiend Jester, a very nice, welcome addition. Malicel Demise, which goes back a long, long time. Really having the significance to go with Ectoplasmer. Other than that, it's just got fair attack and defense. The last monster, so again, like really short of the monsters, especially because Delta dropped out some of the ones that we had added when this deck was first created. We filled it in with some of those Jester monsters that we felt they kind of went with Arkana's theme. Just enough, but those have all been dropped out now. Jester Lord, Jester Confit, in place of better cards that are much closer to what the character played, and Mystic Tomato is just a battle searcher. So, a very short monster lineup, but his deck still makes up for that. So, anti-magic arrows. Really love the art. Again, this came with Legion the Fiend Jester, and it was just a card that was really cool that A, we're getting the card, and B, the art, I think, is just really spectacular. Moving on, Dark Magic Curtain. So this is a card that's definitely been around for a while. It's a really cool card, and if you are newer to the channel, we play a fair amount of the cards with either their respective effects from the anime or some happy medium, if the anime effect might be a bit too much or too unworkable, and then the TCG printed effect is trash. So Dark Magic Curtain is a card that we use the anime effect for, or really more one of those happy mediums. And we denote these types of cards with white stickers. You can find their effects in the document in the bottom of the description of each video, where we have our card erratas. So you can always follow along with what we've typed up professionally that the card's effect is. But we do this so that it's faster in duels, that you can see a marked card and go, okay, this card's probably going to play like the anime, not as much the printed version, because this card is quite a bit different. It only allows you to summon a monster, and it's only Dark Magician. So what we do is, our errata effect for this card is that either player can use the effect the turn that the card is activated. Either player can summon a Dark Magician or a Dark Magician Girl, so it gets that same payoff as the anime, although we did want to leave out the ambiguity by saying card with Dark Magician in its name, so that we really only had the options that we saw in the anime, even if there could have been more. But ours does also have the stipulation where other monsters cannot be summoned, because we like that the printed version has that balancing, that you can't summon more monsters with this card, but we did add that both players can use it because that was ultimately how Yugi won in that duel with Arkana, was taking advantage of not only Dark Magic Curtain's effect, his second effect that Arkana seemed unaware of, but also that the monster he used ended up kind of beating him with, you know, you guys have seen the duel. If you have not seen the duel somehow, definitely check it out. All right, so continuing on again, Ectoplasmer. Again, your best bet is Malice Demise, although anything would really do. 2 copies of Monster Board, so this is definitely a card he actually played. Despite Monster Born and Pot of Greed being filler cards in a lot of our decks because they're so generic. They're great filler cards. They help decks out by giving them draw, by giving them, you know, monster revival. So these 2 cards and these 4 cards in this deck are just very useful all around. Again, Arkana did actually play Monster Born. And while we're usually hesitant to give out 2 copies, his shortage of monsters makes Monster Born a lot more useful and we felt necessary. Soul Taker. So not a card Arkana played. This we're using in place of Beckon to the Dark, which was the ability to outright just destroy a monster. And obviously, that is a non-printable card effect. So this card is similar with the hand, and it gives your opponent 1,000 life points, so there's a balance to destroying a monster. So we picked it up for, you know, that some semblance. Coming back now, 3 copies of 1,000 Knives. Again, this Dark Magic Curtain we had way before the Red Dark Magician. Starting up the trap lineup, and this is where actually a lot of my favorite cards are now, is Dark Renewal. I was especially happy when we finally got this card because I just love a lot of the cards Arkana played. And while, you know, we have most of them, there's still a few that did not make it to a printing in either the TCG or the OCG. Although we have found some clever ways around that, I guess. But Dark Renewal is definitely one of the cards that I was super happy to see printed. Venus Chain, another non-Arkana card. We use it in place of his Nightmare Change, which bound Dark Magician, kind of removing it from play. So, while not quite the same card, we did like the whole, you know, the chain theme, and it does essentially paralyze a monster, just not a normal monster. So, dissimilar, but also a little similar, and this is, again, the kind of cards that we will add to characters' decks to give them a full 40 cards when they come up short of their own. Now, the next 2 cards are cards that have definitely not been in older versions of this deck. First up, and again, coming off the whole cards similar to anime cards, in lieu of having Shadow Balance, another one of the trap cards I love so much to see, we went with Pineapple Blast. The card's been name dropped here and there in comments sometimes, and it has been a card that we have considered. Slight dissimilarity between this and Shadow Balance. This card works that when you normal summon a monster, you activate it, and your opponent gets to choose monsters that they destroy so that you have the same number. So at minimum, you both have 1 monster. Whereas Shadow Balance works when your opponent summons a monster, you get to choose which monsters are destroyed, and you destroy them so that you both have equal fields. And in the anime, this was a board wipe card because Arkana had no monsters when he used it. So Shadow Balance would allow you to clear out all of your opponent's monsters. Pineapple Blast would allow you to clear out all but 1 of their monsters, but still very similar effects. And again, with a lack of Shadow Balance, we really wanted to kind of try to find some way to incorporate that effect. And Pineapple Blast is pretty darn close. So the last card in the deck is a card I do want to take a minute talking about because it's actually really interesting how this card ended up in this deck. And we've had some people argue for it since the beginning. We have some people who I think would be very confused why this card's in the deck. This is Tragedy. So the first that's going to catch your eye is the Guillotine art. Delta and I withheld this card for a long time from this deck on the basis that even though this card somehow came from the anime, there was nothing left of the anime version, at least if you go from anime to the TCG. They've done stuff before, like changing the card's name, or its art, or its card type, or its effect. And the original printing has all of those. Everything has changed. It's not a spell. It doesn't have its original effect, which it's another card that just destroys a monster outright. But there was nothing really that made it even feel close to what was in the anime. And the reason this happens is because you have to go from the anime to the OCG to the TCG. Because when this card was printed in the OCG, it became a trap card. It earned its effect that it has currently, where if an opponent switches a monster from attack to defense, you can destroy all defense position monsters that they have. But the difference was in the OCG, the card is called Tragedy of the Guillotine, and it features the guillotine art. And while I'm sure many of us are familiar with the way that cards are censored when they go from OCG to TCG, the guillotine image and the word guillotine in the name, the last real remnants of the Mystic Guillotine spell card, were gone. They both have the effect that destroys monsters. It's been, translated into more of a more plausible effect. Again, its original effect was just to destroy a monster outright. But for the sake of really pushing the authenticity and making this card feel a lot more wholesome on the deck, we picked up a few of the Japanese art copies and switched out the image with a TCG printing. No, we would not get erratas because this was a little bit cheaper and I had fun doing this. Actually, the Magical Dimension spell card in Yugi's Balisade deck, that's been there from the beginning, is like this. It's actually a Japanese holofoil image on an English card that I did way back when. But yeah, so we really wanted to bring this card to his deck, but really want to make it feel more like it belonged there rather than it being such a derivative from the anime. And again, if you go from the anime to the TCG, it's really not clear. You have to stop at the OCG, see what was left from the anime, and then see which was left, which was removed by the time it got to the TCG. So, in a lot of words, we added Tragedy. We have no plans to change its effect at all because it's a grounded, sensible effect. We could have liked it to be a little bit faster, but we decided that with all the monster removal it already has in the deck, leaving this card with its effect is really not an issue. And the beautiful guillotine art is what we think really helped make it stand out more in this deck, that really feels like it is closer to Mystic Guillotine than the TCG printing allows. That was the final touch that we were really excited to see in the deck, that now, with fewer exceptions than before, this deck is comprised of Arkana's cards. So thank you guys for watching. Definitely stay tuned. We have a lot more of these refined and tweaked decks coming out with our whole, Battle City event. Again, the decks aren't new. They've been around for a while. Some definitely longer than others. But many of them are getting a slight facelift, and all the videos are still going to get redone because some of them were very old videos with much lower quality, and now we want to do everything so that it's much more appealing for you guys watching the videos, reading the deck lists. So stay tuned for the next duel. Like, comment, subscribe.